Do you use EvenG? Did you try to run iOS XRV 9K images on EvenG? Did you have any problem with your EvenG when running iOS XRV 9K? Yeah, I tried and I had some issues. So this video is to help you with some tips and tricks that you can apply to your EvenG if you are trying to run iOS XRV 9K and you are running into issues. So let's see. First of all, I'd like to make a quick introduction about what is EvenG. EvenG is a platform that is being used to emulate virtual environments or virtual devices, creating topologies and creating environments to making tests, demonstrations, and also to practice for certification exams or to make some POCs or proof of concepts. And the good thing for AVNG is that it can emulate a big variety of devices from different types, from different vendors. There is a vast documentation in the website that you can see here on the screen, www.eve-ng.net. You can find a variety of information about that, and they are available in two versions. One is the community. The community is a version, it's a free version that you can install. There are some limitations. You don't have the support, the official support, but if you wanted to have the official support and don't have the limitation that the community provides, you can buy the licenses for the professional. It is like a subscription. It is not so expensive, in my opinion, and you can buy to have more features and no limitation on your EvenG. Here, if you come to the website and you come to documentation, you can see a lot of devices that EvenG can emulate. So you have a vast list of devices, and then you can see like Cisco devices, you can see Juniper, you can see Palo Alto, pfSense, Riverbed, Sophos. You have Nokia, you have a lot of devices. But we focus for our video is not the goal of this video to make a deep dive on EvenG. It's just a quick overview, and then we'll discuss only about those two ones here. Actually, this one here. But it's important to say that Cisco XR or iOS XR is a Cisco iOS for service provider devices. Cisco XRV is a virtual version of Cisco iOS XR, and you can emulate a router on EvenG or other kind of emulation software, or you can create a virtual machine using this XRV. XRV 9000 is a version of Cisco iOS XRV with 64 bits. It's an enhanced version of XRV, and Cisco decommissioned or at least stopped to develop things to XRV. The last version was, I think, Cisco iOS XR 6.5.1, and the newest version 6.5.3 is the version that Cisco started to have the 64 bits. When I started to emulate Cisco iOS XR v9K, it was to make some tests using um, service provider environments, and then to test the service provider features. And it's mainly focused on the Cisco CCIE service provider exam. They use on the blueprint the version 6.5.3, and I created my lab using this thing. I copied some configuration from some other places to put in there, and I created my labs, and I have faced some problems with that. Talking about the issues that I have faced when I was starting to emulate my um, iOS XRV 9K, is that my devices, they were restarting all the time. They were rebooting all the time. I was like in the middle of a configuration 5 minutes later after I have raised the device, and I was in the middle of the configuration, and then I received a message like that from VM Manager, and saying that I lost a lot of heartbeats, and then it started to reboot, and it reloaded the router, and I was losing my whole configuration. So it was a big problem for me because there wasn't a workaround for that. So it was impossible to work because no workaround, and I was in the middle of configuration. And for some things that we have to do, we have a lot of lines of configuration, and then the router reload without any notice and any time to save the configuration by itself. Um, After I made a lot of researches, I found a forum very hide in the internet. It was very hard to find this, and they were talking about UKSM, ultra kernel same page merging. Is a Linux kernel feature that allows the KVM hypervisor to share identical memory pages among different processes or virtual machines on same server. It is a thing that help even G to optimize the resource allocation between the virtual machines. They reuse some spare or not used by other virtual machine. They use resources like memory, like CPU, and it can save resource on the machine. It can be disabled on EventG, and you disable globally this on EventG, but EventG, they don't recommend you to disable. I think because many people run EventG on desktops or notebooks, but in my case, I'm running on a server, and I didn't feel any kind of difference in terms of resource consumption. Like when I disabled this on my EventG, I didn't feel any difference, or if my EventG was consuming more memory disk or CPU. It was pretty much the same. So I disabled, and I didn't feel any difference, and it was working very well after that without device reloading. It still had resources on my server, and then it solved this first issue. To disable the UKSM, you can come to the main page on EventG, go to System, then go to System Status, and you see this page where you can see the resource consumption in your server, and then you see underneath on the low left side, you see UKSM status. You can turn this off, and bam, it's solved. Your problem is solved. You never see your routers reloading again. And in my case, I didn't feel any kind of performance issue. So you have to check if there is any kind of resource consumption increase with the same amount of servers or same amount of virtual machines running inside your EVE-NG. My second issue was related to the configuration. I realized, and then actually I realized before, that my devices didn't have the configuration loading properly. The startup configuration loaded on the device. Sometimes the device um, was coming without any configuration with iOS prompt, and that's it. Sometimes I could see the configuration was loaded, but partially, especially on the interfaces. I didn't see the interfaces with the configuration, IP configuration. Every interface came with shutdown state. So, what I had to do, my workaround was to copy the configuration manually from the startup configuration profile. Let me show you what I was doing. So here is one lab that I have with some iOS XR devices. I have a topology, spine and leaf topology, where I have two spines and three leaves. What I had to do in the past when my configuration was not coming. So I had to come here on startup configuration, and I had to come here to see the configuration. I was copying the configuration, then go into the device, log on the device, then paste the configuration. And then my device was up. And to make this for one or two devices, okay. But imagine that you have 15, 20 devices in the same lab, and every time that you need to start a lab, you have to copy and paste and manually the configuration to all the devices. I tried to make this using Python, but it was taking some time to create the script and etc. And then I went to find the solution, and I tested some other things to the solution. So what I did uh, to solve this issue was I came to the to the main page on EVE-NG. I click in edit it on the lab to edit the lab, and then I increase the time for config script timeout. The default time is 5 minutes or 300 seconds, and I increased this to 900 seconds, which is 15 minutes. Even the iOS XR v9K, it takes from 10 to 15 minutes to reboot completely the router. But I made a test with my routers, and they were taking about 8 minutes to reboot completely. So I put the time for 900, and I started to see results. Most of the devices, they were coming with the whole configuration, and I didn't need any more to make the configuration. But there were some devices that they still had problems to load the configuration, but not all of them, some of them only. And I realized that those devices that were not loading the configuration um, were devices that I came here and I copied the configuration from other place and and paste here on this space, because if you see, you can edit this space. So you can copy and paste the configuration from other place. And but what I had to do, I had to come to these devices. I had to make it the manual procedure to copy the startup config into the device. And what I did after was to export the configuration. When you make the export configuration, you send the configuration which is saved and running on the device to the startup. And then you can see here, all of them now, they are exported to here, because you can see the version that we are running, and you can see the date and time that this configuration was exported. And you have the whole information here. And all the devices, after I made this, all the devices were receiving the configuration, and all of them were running properly with the configuration. But it still had another problem in the end. After I solved the second issue, I realized also that all the interfaces were coming in shutdown state, even though there was a no shutdown statement under the configuration. And I have tried to make a lot of things, tried to check a lot of things, tried to check if there was something to do on the kernel of iOS XRV. I didn't find, and I simply solved this problem, changed the version of my iOS XR v9K device, because I was running 6.5.3, and I increased the version to 6.6.3, and it started to work. All the devices were loading the whole configuration, and all the devices were loading with no shutdown, all interfaces active. Because the workaround was very tough. Every time that I started a device and I started to make the configuration, I had to go to the device and make a no shutdown interface by interface. Because in Cisco iOS XR, you don't have like in iOS XE that you have the interface range command that you can make this in a range of interfaces. Actually, you have to make interface by interface. And sometimes it was very tough because I have 5, 6 interfaces in the router, and I had to make one by one, no shutdown, and a commit command in the end. So I had to raise all the interfaces manually. It was very tough, and I was losing a lot of time. So version 6.6.3 um, that has the same features of Cisco iOS XR 6.5.3, and it was not different. Let's say maybe it has some improvements, but all the same features. And maybe one of the improvements was to have the interfaces in no shut state. So it was a good improvement. So in summary, when you are running iOS XR v9K on your EVE-NG, make sure that UKSM is disabled. Make sure that you exported all the configuration that you have in your startup config and not copying from other places directly to there. Make sure that the config script timeout is set up to 900 seconds, not 300 seconds as default. And don't run the image with the version 6.5.3, because you know that this version, it cannot come up with the interfaces with no shutdown. So that's all that I have for today. Leave your comment and let me know if you have any other problem, if this video could help you, and see you around.